Hello, and welcome to the Illinois LawCast, a podcast about the wisdom, wit, and curiosity of the University of Illinois College of Law. I'm your host, Chris Davies, and this episode is all about the college's regular study abroad trip to Costa Rica. Joining me is Professor Heidi Hurd. She created the course that goes along with this trip 14 years ago and helps guide students through the Costa Rican environments and the environmental law that protects those spaces. Also joining me are Josh Rosen and Sophia Abedi, Illinois law students who took part in the most recent trip in January. I'm grateful to all for sharing their expertise and experiences with the podcast, and I hope you enjoy the interviews as much as I did. Professor Hurd, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
We're going to talk about your trip with the environmental law students to Costa Rica that you went on just a month ago and had to come back to the frigid weather here in Illinois. I'm sure that was not pleasant.
That's right. It was sweltering on the Caribbean and then right back to the polar vortex.
Well, I hope you had a good time despite that rude re-entry to the United States. Can you tell me a little bit about the trip and when it started, how long you've been doing this for?
Okay. Well, this course was invented, back in about 2012, and I've taught it 5 times since. And I've taught it with different co-teachers along the way, but I've always taught it with a fabulous teacher, wildlife biologist down in Costa Rica. And so Mark Wainwright, who is an extraordinary wildlife biologist, ecologist, author of a book that's sold in every gift shop in Costa Rica. So the students love to meet him, spend time with him, and then go buy his book so he can autograph it. He's a teacher of teachers and a guide of guides. And he's really the secret sauce in this course because he's really the person who makes it remarkably eye-opening for students and remarkably special. And he now is the one who largely puts the course together. He largely designs the itinerary in consultation with me. And I sort of give him the values I think we ought to be serving. And he comes up with itineraries that are really marvelous for the students.
Was he someone you knew before you had the idea for this course?
No, not at all. When I first imagined taking students to Costa Rica, I really just got in touch with people across campus because I knew there were other faculty members at the University of Illinois who took students down to Costa Rica, largely folks over in the sciences. And they told me all about the Monteverdi Institute. And that's really our partner organization in Costa Rica. The Monteverdi Institute is specifically designed to foster educational programs in Costa Rica. So the Monteverdi Institute does all the logistics. And Mark Wainwright came to me through the Monteverdi Institute. He leads other programs and educational activities for them. And that's how I came to know him. And we've forged quite a bond over the years. And he's very pro-Illini, and he just adores working with Illinois law students, mostly because it's very novel for somebody like him to get to work with law students. Mm-hmm. Normally, the students who are coming to Costa Rica are biology students and forestry students and silviculture students and so forth. And so it's really novel to get to work with law students in this context.
Tell me a little bit more about what kind of curriculum you guys are sharing with the students, how it applies to law students.
So one of the things I'm always nagging my students about in law is that if they're interested in ultimately going into environmental law and policy, they really need to know a fair bit about the environment. I'm going to say a bunch of things that, have a lot of exceptions. Law students, by and large, there a lot of them are kind of city kids. And they really, it's really surprising to them how the natural world works as a web of interconnected relationships. And it's really surprising to them just where food comes from. We've really, all of us have lost touch with those kinds of aspects of our own lives. But I'm always nagging them. You really have to learn more environmental science to be a good regulator of the environment. And so part of what I'm anxious to do in Costa Rica is to just get them to improve their science literacy and to develop an awareness of the complex webs of lives that are interconnected in ecosystems as complex as the ones in the tropics. And so part of the agenda is really just a natural science agenda. But then, of course, what makes Costa Rica so special is that it suffered dramatic degradation in the middle of the 20th century, mass deforestation. And finally, Costa Ricans woke up to the fact that they were imperiling the tropical treasures that made Costa Rica so special. And they worked some really innovative legal changes to reverse the degradation and to motivate dramatic reforestation. And so it's a wonderful laboratory in which law students can study how sort of legal apathy can allow degradation and how creative legal strategies can be employed to reverse degrading trends and protect natural areas.
You guys spend 9 days, or at least you did on this most recent trip in Costa Rica. Can you tell me a little bit of what's on your itinerary? What kind of things you guys are doing as you're in the rainforest and in Costa Rica? Yeah,
so there's a sense in which the whole trip is dedicated to what I call ground truthing Costa Rica's claim to be a global leader in environmental stewardship. And what we do is we go between circumstances in which Costa Rica is rightly proud of what it has accomplished environmentally and where Costa Rica hasn't lived up to its hype. So, for example, when we arrive in San Jose, we meet with some really famous local politicians who are members of the legislature, and they are, adamant defenders of the environment, adamant advocates for imperiled communities and for environmental protection. And they're very inspiring for students to meet with. Then we head from there with their success stories to the Pacific coast of Costa Rica, where we do a boat trip on the Tarcoles River. And the Tarcoles River is incredibly beautiful and astoundingly polluted by all of the runoff from the Central Valley, from San Jose, and from huge agricultural areas. And the levels of toxins in the Tarcoles River are just off the charts. So we talk about water pollution. We talk about the impact of water pollution on delicate species. We do, we explore these vast mangrove forests in boats, and the students get to see things like scarlet macaws, which are, unbelievably exotic and beautiful, but imperiled by the kinds of pollutants that are coming downriver to the Pacific side of the country. Then, and so there's a study in sort of ways in which Costa Rica hasn't lived up to its promise to be a responsible environmental steward. But then we travel up to Monteverde and up to the cloud forests of the Monteverde region at 5,000 feet and above. And there, massive reforestation has protected biodiversity of such an extraordinary abundance that it's one of the true hotspots for biodiversity in the world. And it is a 3 or 4 day study of tremendous legal success at achieving ecological protection. And then we take the plunge from there back down over to the lowlands, closer to the eastern side of the country, and we look at agro-industry, and we look at huge pineapple plantations and banana plantations, and we learn all about the ways in which Costa Rica hasn't lived up to its promises when it comes to protecting against the ills of agriculture and the impacts of those ills, not just on non-human species and ecosystems, but on vulnerable workers who work in those vast plantations. And we end up on the Caribbean side talking about invasive species, particularly lionfish and the ways that lionfish have devastated fish communities in the Caribbean, but also climate change and its impact on the delicate coral reefs that run up and down the eastern side of Costa Rica and the Caribbean. So it's a great big huge sort of circle or triangle, however you think it.
Yeah, it sounds really busy, all in 9 days. You said this was your 5th time.
Yep.
How has the trip kind of evolved over the time that you've been doing this?
That's a great question. So the first time we went, we didn't go to the Caribbean. We spent a lot of time over on the Pacific coast. And the Pacific coast is where there's an awful lot of tourism. Big hotels and tons of hype about ecotourism. And so we spent a chunk of time over there asking the question about whether ecotourism is really eco, whether ecotourism can come to the rescue and, sort of rescue tourism from its ill effects on natural systems. But I have to tell you, I just didn't love that component. I didn't love hanging out with the big hotels. It felt really strange to take students to fancy 4-leaf, eco hotels where we could no more afford to stay in them than fly. And so we were sort of voyeuristically looking at how nice it would be to be able to stay at such a place, but we weren't staying at such a place. And it had a kind of, hollowness to it. Mm-hmm. And so the next time I said, let's go to the Caribbean, because the Caribbean is remarkably underdeveloped. And there you really get to study the environmental impacts of overfishing, of the lionfish and so forth, without getting swept up into the sort of milieu of Western tourism that characterizes the Pacific side. That was a big change.
Yeah, that's very interesting. In the time that you've been doing this, I'm wondering, you mentioned your partner, Mark Wainwright. What else has been, your favorite part of the trip? What stands out to you?
Personally, I think that the times that I find the most rewarding, the times that reaffirm my commitment to leading this course, despite it taking vast amounts of time throughout the entire year before the course actually takes place. Those times are when you get light bulb moments by students. They'll be out on a night hike in the depths of the cloud forest, and it's pitch dark except for their torches lighting the way. And Mark Wainwright will stop and he'll discover, I remember, here's one example. We stopped, and a whole bunch of students are always, I never want to see a snake. I never want to see a snake. I'm afraid of snakes. I would never see snakes. So Mark stopped, and it was pitch dark, and our torches were just casting glows of light around in the rainforest. And he said, within 12 inches of me is a snake. And everybody's, no. And he said, find the snake. And we looked, and we looked, and we looked. We couldn't see a snake. I mean, the students were highly motivated to see that snake. They were worried it was going to be wrapped around their ankles or something. And he turned back, and behind him were all these aerial roots coming down from a fig tree. And amongst the aerial roots, he just reached up and picked what looked like an aerial root and brought it down. And it was this thin, little, beautiful snake, utterly harmless. And it had just been hanging amongst all of the aerial roots, utterly invisibly. And the students got to pass it around. He always makes sure nobody's got insecticide on or anything. And they could pass it around, and they could hold it. And they were so excited, and their eyes were so big. And the photos of them in the darkness of the forest, holding this delicate, beautiful snake and passing it around. Those are the moments. And then learning all about it and learning about its ecological niche. And those are the moments when the students are so excited they can't sleep. And then they get up at 4:30 in the morning to watch the sunrise the next day. So this trip, they told me, they said, Professor Hurd, we're going to get up tomorrow morning and we're going to watch the sunrise. And I said, it's going to be pouring rain tomorrow morning. Pouring rain. There's not going to be a sunrise. Every one of them to a person was up at 5 a.m, waiting for a sunrise in pouring rain. They just get so excited they can't help themselves. And those are great moments for me.
Yeah. That sounds like something, city kid or not, you don't get to experience here.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
From a legal aspect, how does this trip benefit your students? How do they come back with skills that they wouldn't get otherwise?
Wonderful. Well, as I say, Costa Rica is kind of a unique laboratory for legal inquiry into the strategies that lawyers have available to them to protect the environment. And not all of the strategies that have been used in Costa Rica would be available to us here in the U.S. But even when they wouldn't be, it's really interesting to students to recognize the difference between a country that is able to do certain things legally that we can't do, and to ponder why it is we can't do them. So, for example, back when Costa Rica realized that the amount of deforestation degrading their habitat was becoming unbearable, they passed a constitutional amendment. And the constitutional amendment guarantees every Costa Rican the constitutional right to a healthy environment. And what it does is give every individual Costa Rican legal standing to complain if they think a company, a corporation, another individual, another landholder is doing something that is environmentally harmful, even if it's not personally harmful to that particular individual. In other words, they have standing to complain about practices that may not have any immediate impacts or any impacts ever on them personally. Our standing doctrines preclude us from complaining about environmentally degrading practices that we can't prove impact us personally in ways that deliver up sort of hard provable harms. And so students spend a lot of time imagining what it would be like if in the United States, every one of us had standing to complain about a practice being employed by a mining company or an agricultural company that adversely impacts the environment, even if it doesn't adversely impact any one of us, right? A second thing that Costa Rica did was they incentivized reforestation by paying for eco-services from private landowners. So landholders stopped having an incentive to cut down all the trees on their properties and turn their properties into grazing land or row crop agriculture. They were paid to keep their lands in forest and to regrow forests. And that's really what allowed for reforestation. The payments are small. What would it be like if we adopted an eco-services payment regimen that incentivized environmental restoration rather than degradation? It's available to us. There's no legal boundaries to that. So students get very interested in the ways in which Costa Rica has positively incentivized conservation through eco-service payments. And then, you know, there are lots of other tools that they have used, and we work through them with environmental lawyers who come and talk to us, give us lectures, the politicians who come and talk about, you know, the sort of challenges they're facing with the proposal to build a new mine up on the Nicaraguan border in a delicate watershed area. Things like that really open their eyes to legal strategies available elsewhere that might be available here, but might not be. And when they're not, why not? And maybe they should be.
Yeah, that's fascinating and great that our students are getting that experience that I don't know of many other opportunities like that. And now, you've done this 5 times. Is this a regular thing that students now can, and you know, every X amount of years can join in?
The goal has been and is to do it about every other year. So ideally, if you did it every 2 years, then, you know, no class would be without an opportunity to apply, students in the class. You know, but we have missed, obviously, the COVID years were just a write-off. And, you know, it sort of turns on how long the January intersession period is, and it turns on my schedule and so forth. So we certainly haven't been absolutely reliable about, you know, every other year, as you can tell from the schedule. But our plan is to do it again in, you know, what would be 2028 in January.
If current students, prospective students are interested in this, where can they go to get more information? Just talking with you, or?
They can talk to me. They can email me. They can email Doug Pinheiro, because Doug went on the trip with me this time. He was sort of my partner from the College of Law on this trip. And he actually took the course years ago before he became a member of the staff of the international office. So he was a student in the course once before. This time he was my collaborator from the college, and he is a wealth of information about this course. So, yes.
Awesome. Is there anything else about this trip, about your experiences, that you'd want to make sure that people know?
I think the one other thing that is so interesting about this trip to me, and that probably would come through were you to talk to students in the course, is how often they are nervous about doing things and then so proud of themselves when they've done those things. And so the trip is not without its discomforts. I won't say hardships, but I will say it's discomforts. So, for example, on this recent trip, it was the first time that everybody backpacked into this remote research station. And it was a 3-mile steep, incredibly muddy, downhill track, carrying reasonably heavy backpacks to spend 2 nights and 3 days at this remote research station in this this extraordinary vast wilderness on the backside of Monteverde. And then, of course, they had to pack out, which meant they had to carry those heavy packs back up that steep, muddy track, 3 miles. And there were a number of students who were genuinely really worried that they couldn't do it or they wouldn't do it well. And they were so proud of themselves when they all did it. And I love to see the pride that comes from students getting into wilderness areas and finding that they not only can do things that involve hardship or difficulty, but they positively love it. So we go to this wonderful place where there's this huge waterfall and this big, gorgeous sort of lake and big waterfall. And students are always kind of, it's not natural. For them, it's reluctant. They're reluctant to, first of all, wade in. But eventually, when you demonstrate that they can swim under that huge waterfall to a ledge behind, get up on the ledge and dive through the waterfall, one will do it. Then the next will do it. And then the whole group is going, go, go, go. The next will do it. Pretty soon, everybody's doing it. And this sense of just overwhelming joy and the sense of accomplishment and pride that people take in discovering that nature can be a source of enormous accomplishment and pride, it's thrilling. So it's also great. Although Leopold said, there's something to testing yourself in nature that is distinct from any other place you can test yourself. And we do a fair bit of that in this course. And I think it's hugely advantageous for the students.
Absolutely. And thank you for sharing so much about this really incredible trip and for taking time for the podcast.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you to Professor Heidi Hurd for sharing a wealth of information and memories about the Costa Rica trip. My next guest is Josh Rosen, a third-year student who traveled to Central America with the Illinois Law Group in January. Josh Rosen, thank you very much for joining me.
My pleasure. Happy to be here.
Tell me a little bit to start off why you were interested in going on this trip to Costa Rica with the environmental law program.
Sure. So before the trip, I've had a lot of different traveling experiences, and I've always really loved to be in nature. And it was, mostly from a standpoint of my interest in health and wellness and being outside. And I just thought the opportunity to go on this trip with the College of Law and this renowned naturalist would just be a great opportunity to deepen my knowledge and understanding in this area.
Yeah, and is environmental law something that you've been interested as a student?
No, to be frank, it hasn't. I've mainly taken classes around corporate and transactional law. It's just been more of an interest of mine on the personal side and just hobbies and recreationally.
So what did you get from the trip and how did it help you as a law student?
So I'm a 3L, and something I've been thinking about a lot more these days is just an appreciation for the College of Law, because I'm taking these, complex transactional classes, and so much less is confusing, not just based on the way the professors are teaching it in this specific class, but based on the prior year's worth of knowledge and learning. And so what I really was trying to get from this trip, which I think definitely happened, was an experience where some knowledge and some information could be added to my experience of how I interact with nature and what I think about when I think about the environment. And I think that definitely happened.
What were the highlights for you of the trip?
So I think our time in the Children's Eternal Rainforest was definitely a highlight. It was a couple days. Living circumstances were, I believe the word used was rustic. But we really, by that time as a group, I think everyone was there for the right reasons and kind of bought in and was open-minded to just having a good experience. And I think Professor Hurd and Mark Wainwright, the naturalist guide, the way they led that experience, and specifically, we went on a couple night hikes, and at one point, Mark led the group to basically, be quiet and close your eyes and basically just tune in to all of the life around us in the forest at night. Mind you, that was after we learned about the Costa Rican jaguar and the fact that it was around, and if you interacted with the jaguar, good luck. But the fact that everyone on that hike had total trust in the process and really bought into that and leaned into that experience turned out to be tremendously powerful.
Yeah, you mentioned your personal interest in health and wellness, and Professor Hurd was telling me about the 3-mile hike in and out to get to the cloud forest. What was that like?
Very different experiences going in versus going out. So going in was all downhill, and if you're an experienced hiker, which I'm not, but I'm enough of a hiker to know that going down is usually tougher than going up. And when we went down, it was pretty muddy. And so you had to be really careful going down and kind of controlling your momentum. And so that was very nice, much slower pace than going up, because also Mark Wainwright, the guide, we were doing a lot of stopping and lecturing along the way, which was great. And then the way up was to exit and return back to civilization. And, that was more on your own pace. Personally, I sort of treated that as a workout challenge. So I did that much faster than the way down.
What are you going to take away most from this, either as a person, as a law student, or maybe in the future as a lawyer?
I think there's a couple things. Like one, just on a macro level, is just a really deep appreciation and understanding for the value of protecting the environment, protecting the wilderness, and what that really means. I think the experience that we had, not only being in this beautiful, transcendent place, but with a group of students, professors, and a guide who really loved this place and supplemented the natural beauty with all this information about all the life that's there, the ecosystems. And so I think that's one thing, is just a real understanding and appreciation for why we have to take steps to preserve those areas. Mm-hmm. And then the second thing is just kind of back to this idea of, these little learning crystals. And I think that, I learned so much that I'm hoping, down the road now, I can pick up on new concepts and build off of this experience.
Very cool. Imagine a 1L student, or maybe a prospective student, were to ask you about this it's coming up again in a couple years, hopefully. What would you suggest, to them about the trip, why they should do it?
Right when I got back from the trip, I was telling anyone who had listened, basically, that it was a really transformative trip. And I remember I wasn't a 1L, but, last year during the info session, all of the people that either had gone on it or, had left reviews in the past, just talked about how powerful of an experience it would be. And I just think the opportunity to go to this beautiful place with a professor who's deeply invested and passionate about the subject, and a guide in Mark Wainwright who, is one of the most fascinating people I've ever met, and just one of these people who clearly lives his mission in everything he does, and feels so strongly and knows so much about nature, that the opportunity to have that experience as a group and individually is incredibly powerful, whether you want a career in environmental law, in which case you should definitely go on it, or, you're someone who cares about the environment, wants to learn more, and loves the opportunity for an impactful trip.
Great. Well, Josh, thank you very much for sharing your experience.
Thanks for having me.
The final guest for this episode is second-year student Sophia Abedi, who, like Josh, went with Professor Hurd to Costa Rica on this most recent trip. Sophia, thank you very much for joining me today. What was it about the Costa Rica trip that initially sparked your interest and made you want to find out more?
Yeah, that's a great question. It was a very exciting experience to kind of learn about it. Initially, I had Professor Hurd as my 1L torts professor, And being in that class, just getting to know her more and being so intrigued by all of her stories, I feel like that kind of drew me in because she had mentioned the program to our class and how it happens every 2 years. So it definitely felt like a once in a lifetime opportunity, and it really proved to be that. I was so excited because I'd never been to Central America before. I love to travel, but never had the opportunity to go down there. So that was something that made me really excited about it, and just the opportunity to be with nature and explore environmental law. Those are some of my passions coming to law school. That was something that I was trying to see and do, have a hands-on experience. So that was kind of ultimately what drew me in at the start.
So environmental law was something you came in with an interest in, something you see maybe as part of your future as well?
Environmental law is definitely a passion of mine that I've been interested in sustainability and being able to see how we can improve the environment and the world as a whole. And so I think that was something that drew me into this program specifically. Taking environmental law and ethics now too has really shown a light on how important it is as an attorney to think about those things as well. And it really seeps into everything that we do.
Yeah. On the trip, what were some of the things that stood out most to you? And this could be about, the environmental law, or it could be something completely unrelated. I mean, what was your experience?
Yeah, I think the trip is a very unique experience as a whole because it's a group of students that are all there because they're passionate about the law and the environment. And then we're with Professor Hurd as well as Mark Wainwright, who was our tour guide on the program. And it's very unique and different because I think it puts us all in an experience where it's a lot of new things all at once. We went on various hikes. We kind of got the opportunity to go all around Costa Rica. We started in the Monteverde cloud forest. We were in San Jose, which is the capital, and we just got so many different experiences. We went to an active volcano area, and the things that stood out to me was kind of the bonding and the community that all of us students were able to get from the experience. I think that being put into very stressful situations that were good for us was really cool. We went on a lot of hikes, especially when we were in the Children's Eternal Rainforest in Monteverde, and having a big group of students all with similar interests all on those types of strenuous hikes was very unique because it really bonded us together. We were able to be there for each other. It was very muddy when we descended into the cloud forest and then on our way out too. So I think those were the most memorable things because it really allowed us to get outside of our comfort zones and really see the environment, feel it, touch it, see it, all of that. So I think that was the most memorable part, was obviously the whole trip, but the hikes especially. Yeah,
you mentioned, you like to travel, you like being outdoors. Those hikes, I mean, they sound pretty tough. How did you handle it as a, just a law student, someone who's not used to, we're here in Illinois where it's pretty flat, not used to those terrains?
Yeah, definitely. I think that it was a bit of an adjustment because of how high elevation we were. We were constantly changing elevations, which was a really unique experience. So I think that it was a lot of just moral support from one another, from Professor Hurd, from Mark Wainwright, our tour guide too. We all kind of encouraged each other no matter what. And I think I love being outside and being within nature, but I had never really done such strenuous hikes like that. I did once when I studied abroad in France, but I think that it was kind of incomparable just because of the weather and then all of the different climates and also the ability to see so many different animals and wildlife on our hikes. I think that was what really grounded me in the experience. We had a day where we had a solo hike and we just had the opportunity to go and be in nature and really pay attention to the sights and sounds. And we were then able to, I think, really have the, strength to keep going because we were able to be surrounded by so much beautiful nature and things that we don't necessarily see here in central Illinois. So it was pretty cool to have that opportunity too.
Is there one thing above others that you remember from this trip that you will hold on to the most as either a law student for your 3L year or when you graduate as a lawyer?
Definitely. I think that the experience as a whole was very transformative because all of the community building and the ability to, I think, just be in nature, be so immersed was really eye-opening to me. It was something that reminded me of the importance of kind of taking a step back and realizing why I came to law school in the first place, why I want to be a lawyer. I think that the sense of community building, but also being around so many people with so many different interests, but we all kind of were able to come together and accomplish the same things all as a group and as a community was really an amazing experience. I think that it taught me the importance of being there for one another and why we are advocates and why we're going into this profession and being attorneys. I think that that was a really cool experience for me, was to just be reminded of why I came to law school in the first place.
Is there anything else that maybe I haven't asked you about that you felt was really important about this trip?
Yeah, I think that the trip as a whole was very engaging, and it provided, I think, all the students that were on it with a unique perspective that we gained while being there. I think the importance of, you always hear the importance of going outside and kind of being with nature and to be able to better understand it, but it really holds true. By being there in Costa Rica, we were able to see all of the things that we read about. We had a lot of different legal readings and policy papers that we read, and just seeing it all and seeing how it impacted various communities. We had the opportunity to go visit an indigenous community and seeing how their cocoa farms were really important to their sustainability and just how they as a community were able to make money. And I think that those types of experiences where you go head on and you go into the communities and you immerse yourselves was very eye-opening and unique, and something that it's really great to read something like that, but being there in person was really transformative, which I enjoyed.
Yeah, I imagine it was absolutely unparalleled as a law student. Sophia, thank you very much for making time for us. I really appreciate you sharing your experience.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you once again to all my guests. To Professor Hurd for sharing her knowledge, and Josh Rosen and Sophia Abedi for sharing the memories and lessons they took away from this trip. If you would like to know more about Illinois Law's focus on environmental law or more details about the Costa Rica trip, please check out the links in our show notes. Thank you, as always, to our listeners for making time for the Illinois LawCast. If you have any comments or suggestions, please email us at podcast@law.illinois.edu. Illinois LawCast is available on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, or wherever fine podcasts are downloaded. This episode was recorded, mixed, and edited by me, Chris Davies. Special thanks to Kelly Moss for our album art and other graphics, and Krista Getke for her help in the editing process. Until next time, thanks again for listening to the Illinois LawCast.